I've had some questions on how I finish off the belt, and I didn't really go into that in a lot of detail, but I thought today I would take a minute and cover that. So what I'm going to make is the loop or the keeper that goes next to the buckle on the belt that you put the tip of the belt through once it's gone through the buckle. So in order to do that, what I do is when I cut the strap of leather, I go ahead and I dye a piece of scrap that I will make the loop out of. So that's what this is from when I made the belt. And then I'm going to cut a strap here that I'm going to make that belt loop or keeper from. So now that I have the piece cut, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to edge that. In other words, I'm going to round over the belt. And I'll start on the back. If you edge the front before the back, it makes it harder to edge this back because of the flimsiness of this. So I'm just using a number 1 Ron's edger to remove just the back side little corners of the leather. And then I'm going to use the Ron's tool number 2 edger to do the front. And that creates a rounded edge that is more comfortable to have on the belt. Now that I have my strap cut, I'm going to cut and edged. I'm going to put a mark along the edge of the belt, and on this is where the stitches will go. So I'll create the mark to follow with my stitching chisels. And then I'll take the stitching chisels that match the chisels that I used on the belt. In this case, it's a Weaver 5mm stitching chisel. And I will start here and I will create the stitching holes for that belt. And I will finish this and come back to you. Now that I have the holes created here, I need to figure the length for the keeper, which is going to go around this leather basically twice. Once will go where the buckle's at, and then when the tip goes through it. So to do that, I'll just hold this on here, and I will measure around this and mark where it needs to be cut with my fingernail here. Then I'm going to cut that off, and I'm going to give myself just a little bit of room because when I put the stitches in, the length of leather will actually shrink slightly as I pull those stitches tight. So now I have that cut to length. The next thing I need to do would be to burnish the edges. So it takes from that rough leather there to a smoother surface. So I'm going to take and apply a little bit of water to the edge here. You notice it darkens up some there on the edge when I do that. That'll dry back to the color that it needs to be once the water is wicked out of it. And this burnishing is, it slicks down those fibers so that the belt is, or the belt loop is smooth and comfortable and looks finished as well. So I'm going to finish doing that, and then I'll be right back to you. Now that I have the piece of leather cut to length, the holes on it, the edges burnished here, I'm going to do the stitching. And it will take about 3.5 times the length of the strap of leather to do one side. And I'm going to do this all as one piece, both sides. So I've got a piece of thread here that is about 7 times, almost 8 times the length of the belt. And I will thread the needle on this so that I can do the stitching. And then once I get this thread, then I'll do the same saddle stitch pattern that I do on the edge of the belt. And so there's a lot of details that go into the keeper. It takes up a pretty good chunk of time just to do that. You almost feel like you've got the belt done when you get done, but you don't. You got to do the keeper yet. So I will go through these. And so one needle from the front, one from the back, and then I will leapfrog my way down this keeper until I have this belt keeper or loop totally stitched. So I won't bore you with the whole thing. When I get this stitched, then I will come back to you here in just a moment. I just about have this stitched up here. Just a few more stitches on this. Once I've got the stitches done, it'll look about like that. If you look at the stitches themselves, they look pretty good. The leather is a little bit bunched up from the stitches, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to gently tap down these stitches. And by doing that, you end up with a more defined stitch, and the leather is back approximately to the length that it was beforehand. Next, I'm going to apply some sealer on here, as it's easier to do while the leather is flat instead of as a loop. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some sealer here. And if you remember from my belt making videos, I apply sealer several times. This actually had one coat of sealer applied to it before I had cut it into the strip as well. So we've got the sealer here, and I'm going to let this dry now, and then I'll come back to that. Now that the sealer is dry, I have the strip that's got the stitching, so I need to make this into a loop. So I'll take my thread here, and I'm going to make a stitch that is X-shaped, that helps hold the belt in a nice loop. So I will just use this thread that was left over and sew an X pattern on here. Probably hard to see. Trying to move and get it done, but also try not to stab myself. I got that tight. Now I'm going to finish off with a square knot. I'll tie these two pieces together. So as you would say, right over left, left over right, through here. And then to finish off the thread, I'm going to use this tool here, Thread Zapper. And I'm going to cut the thread. Probably won't be able to see it very well in here. I'm going to cut the thread and melt the ends of the thread at the same time. By doing that, it helps keep it from untying. And now I have a completed loop for the belt. That is, other than probably one more or two more coats of sealer. All right, now that I have the loop completed, I need to mount the loop, the keeper, to the belt. I'm using this nickel-plated brass, solid brass buckle. That's from Buckle Guy. And I'm going to use 2 Chicago screws, also from the Buckle Guy, here to complete that. And I like to use the Chicago screws. You can use a rivet, but The Chicago screw allows you to do maintenance to the belt later or change a buckle if you so desire. So the first thing I need to do is figure out the 4 holes. There'll be 2 on the end here and 2 up here to attach that. So I'm going to use these dividers, find the center of the belt just behind the where the buckle comes through. So I'm going to use that from both sides to make sure I'm in the center. I'm going to use this rotary punch from Weaver to make a 1/4 inch hole through the leather. Then I'm going to fold this back, and I'm just going to go through far enough to mark it. I find that if I come all the way through, that it tends to come out a little bit off center. So I went through and marked it. Then I will make this hole here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other end here, except for I'm doing it from the back first. And then I fold this over. I line up the first hole here. I mark this hole for the back side. And then I will cut that hole through here as well. So now we'll have the 4 holes completed that are needed to mount the buckle. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll feed this buckle through it. And then the Chicago screws, they will probably back out over time. So what I do is I'll put a little bit of glue on the threads. Now this is just a regular glue. This one's actually a Carpenter glue. There's nothing special about the glue. And it's just to lock it in place. You can still take a screwdriver and undo it. So I'll put the Chicago screw on this side, flip this over, and I'm going to install the second part of that Chicago screw system here. And I'm not going to tighten it all the way down until I get the other side put in. Then I'm going to take this next Chicago screw, once again with a little bit of glue. Like I say, this just locks the threads. Doesn't do much more than that. Over time, these Chicago screws will back out, and then you end up with something missing as it comes apart. Now I'm going to feed this loop over the belt. This is the finished side up here, all the way down to here. This is where we sewed it together on the back, and it's going to be hidden here underneath there. This loop looks a little bit lighter, but it needs more sealer put on it, and it'll darken up some as I put another coat of sealer on it. Let's put the second screw through here. Tighten this down, snug it up, and then I always align the slot with the length of the belt. I just feel like it's less likely to back off if it doesn't have that friction from putting it on and off. So there we've completed the assembly of the buckle on here. I'm going to go ahead and make the holes on the other end while we're doing this. So I'm going to measure down on this belt. Now this belt is going to be a 42-inch belt. So it's for someone with a 40-inch waist. You add 2 inches to the waist size, and then that would be the proper belt length. Now when I get above 40 inches, I usually go with 6 holes instead of 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a main hole on 41 and on 42 inches. And I'm just using these dividers, and I'm marking every inch where the holes go. They're an inch apart. So there's 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, and 44. And then I'm going to make sure that they're centered. So I don't put a hole off center because your eye will notice that. And then I'm going to use this rotary punch once again, and I'm going to make these holes here. I bring it down, I just kind of imprint lightly and make sure I'm centered on the hole or on the mark for the hole. And here. And those are done. So now we've completed this belt. This belt is in mahogany. I refer to this as the classic belt. It's got a gloss nickel buckle with a leather keeper and black thread along the edges. Now I will put one more coat of sealer on everything, maybe a couple times on the loop here. It'll darken up and match the belt. I hope that better explains how I finish off the belt, and appreciate you taking time to visit today. If you would subscribe and like or share my video, I'd appreciate it. Have a great day. Thanks.